Welcome everyone. In the following I'm going to read an essay by my friend Max Gottschlich on philosophy in a time of automated thinking. I'm going to link to the essay as well. So where does philosophy stand in a time of so-called AI? Here's Max's essay. Why study philosophy? The first answer might be because we want to learn how to think rigorously. It's a way of thinking that goes to the foundations of what is. Philosophy is not merely about acquiring information for a specific field of application in a particular segment of society, which is what so-called education gives us. Philosophy starts by questioning what the other sciences presuppose, the assumptions of all activity, cognition, and knowledge as a whole. One can put it in loftier terms even. Philosophy is the thinking of thinking and the unity of thinking and being. And philosophy does this methodically. But what exactly is the point of it? Instead of the purpose of this activity lying in an overarching goal, doing philosophy is itself already the presence of the highest goal, that reason enlighten itself more profoundly and grasp itself in its actuality. The goal of philosophy is not to entrench oneself in an ivory tower. It is to, and this is a quote from Hegel, it is to grasp our own time in thought. That's to say, to arrive in thought at ourselves and our actuality without ideological shortcuts nor illusions. We seek to comprehend what constitutes a human relation to ourselves and to the world, one that is determined by reason in the pursuit of knowledge and in action. We seek to comprehend what nature is and how reason presents itself in nature. Ultimately, we want to cognize reason in and for itself and to comprehend the logical forms and principles. In this, it turns out that everything is related to everything else. The pathway upwards to the principles, to the universal, is simultaneously the path downwards to the individuals, into actuality. Because everything is related to everything else and everything is mediated by everything else, philosophy, as it seeks to reveal all of this, is a system. This is why one cannot isolate individual disciplines of philosophy and say, for example, I am an ethicist and epistemology is not my concern. So this is not what we can say, because philosophy is a system. That's to say, it is an organism. The whole is present in every part, present in each discipline under a specific aspect. Just like your brain is nothing without your body, or your hand is nothing without the arm and without the body to which the arm belongs. Do you have a definite concept of action? Then you also have, implicitly at least, a definite concept of science. So how does one learn this rigorous systematic thinking? Clearly central to the study of philosophy is gathering as broad a range as possible of historical knowledge of terminology, concepts, arguments, and intellectual positions. It is possible, of course, to have acquired an encyclopedic knowledge and to be able to say precisely which argument stands in which paragraph and on which page a philosopher has said something. To be able to recite the 10 categories of Aristotle or the 12 categories of Kant. But yet, this is not really philosophizing. What is lacking here with such an encyclopedic knowledge of the so-called history of philosophy? To philosophize requires, right from the outset, that information is not simply obtained externally and then reproduced. Vital to the whole process is comprehension of the fact there is an issue, a Sache in German, die Sache. There's a heart of the matter revealing itself in these forms of thought and arguments in definite ways on a specific level of reflection. This level of reflection in the subject matter can only be acquired by the practice of autonomous thinking. Comprehension must be accomplished by oneself, for we do not simply possess specific concepts. For Hegel, man is the existing concept. For Hegel, the human being is the idea that understands itself. It is the concept that exists. Comprehending is like pulling together an initially loose manifold of threads in their own context, finding the inner unity of a fabric. Sooner or later comes the illuminating insight, the eureka moment, binding the clues, the threads together, even for the most difficult problems. Reason, the ancient Greeks spoke of logos, is revealed. It cannot hide forever, but opens itself up in different places and goes on to illuminate more frequently recurring and ever more extensive relations. Thinking is an activity that illuminates itself, one that requires persistence and strictly principled consistency. No one can relieve us of the effort of thinking, of comprehending. No teacher, and certainly no machine. Thinking has to be learned. It cannot be outsourced. It is not to be replaced by an automated linking of signs. We live, however, today in a time of automated thinking, as the Frankfurt philosopher Bruno Lebrux described impressively already many decades ago. Here a word on the use of so-called artificial intelligence might be in order. In contrast, perhaps, to other fields of life and research, for us in philosophy, AI does not offer helpful tools we are always eager to make use of. Being comfortably and effortlessly led in study and research by algorithms, finding orientation in a subject simply by pressing a button, these are not favorable prospects when we are concerned with the thinking of thinking. And not just to add to what Max here writes, we're not concerned with information. If all you can do is spit out again, my words, not Max's, the categories of Kant and the categories of Aristotle, and where Hegel says this, that, and the other, then yes, use the bot, use the AI, but then philosophy is not for you because you're not thinking. The use of AI rests upon the illusion of easy availability in matters of philosophy. This illusion is the greatest obstacle to acquiring an education of one's own. Or, I should add, to use the German word, not education, but genuine Bildung, which goes way beyond education. Whoever wishes to avoid the struggle with the matter, including the experience of failure, of not understanding, whoever does not struggle with the resistance of what initially appears to be a completely opaque text or form of thought, in order to draw out their own insights, deprive themselves, if you're not willing to do this, and you deprive yourself of the possibility of genuine insight and new knowledge. Note here perhaps a physical example. Only against constantly increasing resistance can one preserve the body's own physical powers. Without gravity, the musculature quickly degenerates. Someone's skill in executing physical tasks can be measured by the magnitude of resistance they can overcome. The same is true in intellectual tasks of the mind. Do not shy away from working on difficult texts. The belief that it is possible to delegate the struggle of comprehension to AI leads us into a double dependency. First, on the synthesis of science according to probability by the algorithms, and second on the data material that is currently available on the net. Such dependencies amount to the direct opposite of critical thinking, which knows on which sources it relies and exactly why and how it does so. The alternative would be the ultimate dogmatism. To use AI meaningfully, for example, as a translation support, one must oneself always be better than the AI package, that's to say, capable of assessing and evaluating the quality of the combinations in the material delivered. However, this too must itself be learned. In apparently enlightened times, the byword of the Enlightenment, according to Immanuel Kant, must be insisted upon more than ever. Have the courage to use your own understanding. Sapere aude. It appears that we lack considerably the energy and resilience for autonomous, self-motivated thinking that reflects upon its foundations and prerequisites. In philosophy, thinking should liberate itself. It should become an independent, self-grounding thinking, founded only on the authority of reason, which exists in every person in individuo. So individually, reason exists in every person. Therefore, we must recoil from the fatal attitude of being led by someone else's hand through our own cultural history as if we were its consumers. Learning philosophy unavoidably requires, as Hegel puts it, the sour labor of the concept. This consists of serious labor in the course of the years to work through and acquire the objective culture of systematic thinking that has been achieved in the history of philosophy over millennia. Working through the literature is not to be accomplished with an armchair consumer attitude or in bits and pieces between stops on the bus. We only learn a foreign language by active speaking, not by sampling or streaming. You will see that philosophical texts are initially opaque, incomprehensible, silent. Sentences are read whose meaning is not understood. The words themselves are not understood, let alone what the point of it all is. There seems to be nothing but signs without meaning. But just wait. These texts are objective spirit. The spirit lies in them as in a sarcophagus. That spirit must first awaken to new life by the one who reads it, as Wilhelm von Humboldt puts it. But being able to bring the signs back to life requires a receptivity, a resonance space. I can only receive the meaning from the text being read which I'm capable of producing and reviving in myself. I must therefore know, for instance, what question the text seeks to answer. The more we occupy ourselves with the matter, with the heart of the matter, the more concrete our concept, which we are, remember, becomes the more meaningful, and the text becomes more meaningful. Even up to the point where we can literally enter into a dialogue with the text. Then we notice that the great texts reveal ever more new meaning because our resonance space has deepened. So how can we deepen our resonance space? The maxim is, read as many of the great primary texts of the philosophical tradition as possible, where read means the following: study, meditate, excerpt, and read again. Erich Heintel, a major Viennese philosopher of the 20th century, would always emphasize the following: the best secondary literature is found in reading the primary text over and over again. Still, the question remains urgent. Where on earth should one begin? It is indeed hard to see the forest for the trees. It is hard to know which are the great, important, influential texts and to distinguish between the great systems and what plays only a supporting role. However, even in thinking, there is no need to reinvent the wheel. There is indeed development and progress in the systems of philosophy. Not everything is of the same weight when it comes to gaining insight into reason and its actuality. It is best to begin with the European tradition of philosophy began to move on from myth to logos, from storytelling speech to self-justifying speech. That is to say, with the Greeks, Plato and Aristotle are the first great systematizers who in principle already reflected on all the questions and problems that arise in philosophy. One can take up a variety of perspectives on the history of the development of thought. According to my understanding of it, the next great step would be Kant and transcendental philosophy, the critiques of reason. So begin with Plato and Aristotle, and then move on to Kant. Kant is the first after Plato who accomplished a revolution in thinking. Once the necessity of the Kantian standpoint has been grasped, then it will also become clear that the next task is to go with Kant beyond Kant. This opens up the possibility of a second revolution in thinking, which is what Hegel did. It is not possible to begin with Hegel. Indeed, without Kant, there is no pathway to understanding Hegel. By working through these revolutions in thinking, we are ourselves enabled to think effectively and systematically, to penetrate the problems of our time and to find answers determined by reason for these problems. Only in this acquisition, only by working through the philosophical traditions, does it become possible to at some point get over them. Whoever thinks they can reinvent the wheel in philosophy to discover new principles may well end up rekindling insights of the pre-Socratics. Studying, too, has to be learned and conducted with a specific method. Autonomous thinking begins in the university, in the lecture hall. The schools hardly prepare the students for this. University study is not a training in the forms and procedures for presenting material. In philosophy, so-called bulimic cramming, stuffing short-term memory immediately before an examination with the material and then after presenting it in the exam forgetting it again just as quickly, is especially meaningless. It must be emphasized how important it is for the acquisition of knowledge to use the old, tried and true technique in education of taking notes. Nowadays, the view is ever more widespread that this can be dispensed with by resorting to technology and media, which again evoke the semblance of easy availability. Why take notes when the PowerPoint slides can be downloaded, or a photo can be taken with the smartphone? But then why is taking notes so important? Even though, but in fact precisely because, and not just at first, it takes effort. Because in that already, in taking notes, there's already an elementary acquisition activity that you are exercising. For every sentence that you hear, you also have to think with the speaker and immediately differentiate. Is this something essential that must be noted down, or can I leave it out? This distinction of the essential from the inessential is itself an activity of comprehension. This must be exercised. At first, the student may be unsure how to distinguish and seek to write down almost everything, which is what should be avoided by using a specific technique. But the better you get, the more you know and the more that you have acquired. And this happens only through the performance of this enactment of this vital education technique of taking notes. And the easier distinguishing now becomes for you, and the more precise, structured and concentrated your notes become. Autonomous thinking is not advanced through memorizing scripts in PowerPoint slides by heart. If you just memorize by learning by rote, as the English would say, then you will not rise to the occasion of learning how to think. Now, on the subject of engagement with sources in secondary literature, the visit to the special library comes highly recommended. A word of warning against the illusion, again, of easy accessibility on the internet. The student must be aware of making themselves dependent on what is currently by chance available online by the grace of algorithms. Of course, a great deal is available in ebook format or papers, etc. But there is a vast amount on the internet that is unusable, stuff that anyone can post there. Whoever has tried to publish a book with a good publisher or an article in a specialist journal knows the hurdles that have to be overcome to reach that goal. Another important point is that the literature in philosophy does not get old, as happens in the special sciences with their research fronts. It often happens that older works are more rigorous, deeply thought through and comprehensive than the newer ones. I would especially recommend the series of monographs on modern philosophers by Kuno Fischer, published at the end of the 19th century. Anyone who wants to get to know the method, the Greek word methodos means path or course of investigation, of academic study, also in relation to the other classical disciplines of university study in greater detail, would do well to read Schelling's lectures on the method of academic study. I should also point out that the endurance required in this engagement goes far beyond the time of study at the university. At any rate, a course of study at the university can, if it is well organized, cannot do much more than lay the foundations for further private study. I often hear it said that, as a rule, it takes 10 years on the basis of regular exercise until you arrive at a stage where you can think systematically for yourself, where it is possible to move confidently within a system. What you gain from this effort is not inconsiderable. It is an experience of freedom in thinking, consisting of the concept encountering itself in the world. Aristotle, an encyclopedic thinker, if ever there was one, unparalleled, taught that the greatest happiness was to be found not in a life of pleasure, and that it would not be found to be lasting in political life. The greatest happiness, oidaimonia, he believed, was only to be found in Theoria itself, in the Wissenschaft, in science. For Aristotle, it is in the actual performance, in the enactment of cognition, of the relations of actual reality that we are, at least for a few fulfilled moments, united with the gods. Thank you very much for listening.